Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you.
Hi there. I'm so glad you're back for another episode. Before we dive into today's episode, let me just get a few reminders out of the way. The new Zoom support group cohorts will begin the week of September the 9th. If you are interested in joining one of these groups, please email me. These are Zoom groups. They meet weekly, and there is a fee involved. It runs for 8 weeks total, so it's not an ongoing type of group, and they are closed. There will be groups for estranged moms, recently reconciled moms, and estranged adult children. So if you're looking for support and you meet one of those three criteria, please email me, and I'm happy to get that information out there to you. Also, if you're looking for one-on-one coaching support, please reach out. I have availability for one additional client for the month of August. And again, send me an email and I'm happy to give you information about that. And that email address is theestrangedheart@gmail.com. And as a reminder, there's lots of new things coming in October of this year for the Estranged Heart, for the podcast and my coaching services and things along those lines. So be listening out for that. With that being said, on to today's episode. So today's episode is titled, But We Were So Close. I don't understand what happened. How closeness can lead to estrangement. And before we dive in, the quote for today is, though many of us take pride in how different we are from our parents, we are endlessly sad at how different our children are from us. And that is by Andrew Solomon. So today's episode came about by way of an estranged adult child who emailed and made this suggestion. And I want to read just a blip um, of what they sent to me. Hi, Creed. I was wondering if you've ever thought about doing an episode on enmeshment. I came from a family that was extremely closely enmeshed. On the surface, we were close, but in reality, I was suffocated by my family demands and total lack of boundaries. I imagine enmeshment is a big contributing factor for lots of estranged children. I would agree with this estranged adult child. As a matter of fact, I think a, l- significant number of estrangements are a result of this. And I'm talking about estrangements where there was not significant physical sexual traumas, those types of things where families are left. Typically, the parents come to me and they're like, we were so close, and there was no abuse in our family, and I just don't understand why they won't talk to me. And I see this a lot. So I'm glad that this estranged adult child reached out, made the suggestion. And so here we are today to talk about enmeshment and how and why it leads at times to estrangement. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what is the definition of enmeshment? And I think that enmeshment, for some people, enmeshment and codependency are kind of inter, interchanged with one another. And my understanding of enmeshment and codependency is that they are two separate things. Typically, the enmeshed Enmeshment leads to codependency. Okay. So, um, enmeshment is very often, if not most of the time, confused with closeness and intimacy. When I'm working with my coaching clients and they tell me, I don't understand. I have friends who are so close with their kids and they have such great relationship and their kids are always with them and they're just talking about all the things that these other families have that are quote unquote so close. And as soon as I hear so close today, I I take a step back. It's a red flag for me because so many of those families who appear to be very close, appear to be very healthy, all of these things, I think beneath the surface, they're not. Now, that's not to say that there aren't families who do have healthy connections and are not enmeshed and they're simply very close and have healthy relationships with one another. Those families do exist. I am talking about families experiencing estrangement. Okay. Not every family who is close is healthy in relationship with one another. Typically, someone somewhere in the family is not happy, is not healthy in mind, body, and spirit. And they are working from trauma responses of, as this estranged adult child said, feeling suffocated, feeling like I can't get away from you people. Like I don't know who I am, right? So, um enmeshment is characterized by a lack of boundaries, um and the members of the family have difficulty separating themselves from each other. And when I say separating themselves from each other, I'm not talking about I don't have a problem if my kid goes to their friend's house for the weekend, but they usually come back and they're here with me during the week and we go on vacations together and we go here together and we do that together and all the things are together, right? So that's enmeshed families. They prioritize loyalty and that emotional attachment above everything else. How could you do that to me? I'm your mother. That's an enmeshment statement. But I'm your mom. Why would you not invite me on your vacation? I love the grandkids. I love spending time with you guys. And I feel so alone when you don't invite me. I can't believe you didn't invite me. That's a mom who's enmeshed with her adult child. And while this is prevalent with mothers and daughters, I tend to see a lot of it also with mothers and sons after they get married. And then it's the mothers think it's the daughter in law's fault, when in reality, there's significant enmeshment and the daughter in law has come along. And now there's the separating of the mother and son. And to be healthy, and mom doesn't see it that way. Okay. Um, other examples would be when a parent calls their adult child multiple times a day. I hear that too. We were so close. We used to talk 5 and 6 times a day. That's not healthy. Where is your adult child's, who are they outside of you? Who are you outside of them? Where is their life, their friends, their interests, and all of those things that are separate from you? Where are yours as a parent? If your life is wrapped up in your kid's life and you don't know who you are outside of your children, it's very likely that you had an enmeshed relationship. Okay. Um, another example is when a parent expects mm, somewhat immediate, consistent attention, regardless of their child's other commitments, a wife, children of their own, a job, travel, things like that. Well, I understand that you're busy, but I'm your mother. Can't you make time for your mother? Right? That can be a sign of enmeshment. And the big one I see too from when I'm talking with adult children is the guilt trips to get them to um, comply with their wishes. And again, those guys kind of said that earlier. I can't believe you didn't invite me. I'm going to be so lonely while you're off with your family and my grandchildren and having fun. I can't believe you didn't invite me. That's guilt tripping, right? So when a parent's needs and emotional security, emotional stability takes precedence over an adult child's independence, their own needs and wants and things like that, that's an enmeshed relationship. Period. End of story. Okay. Enmeshed relationships can also look like a parent treating their kid as their therapist, sharing personal problems, financial worries. Well, your dad left, and he abandoned us, and so I'm working, and we don't have to, we I don't have the money to pay for that, right? When dad was here, I had the money to do that. I don't have it anymore. Those types of things, that's not their business. It's not their business. Okay? Um when the parent wants the child to be their best friend, when I hear a parent say, "My daughter, she was my best friend," I immediately think of enmeshment. You People are really kind of, for the most part, by and large, have their best friends are within their age range, their generations, their, where you share things in common and things like that, not your child. And the same thing for your child. Your child should be having relationships with people of their own age, age groups and things like that. Um, and another sign of enmeshment is when, it's up to the kid to make the parent happy, right? For consoling them, right? When we're upset. This is something that my youngest daughter experienced after the end of my 10-year relationship. And I had no idea at the time that that's what I was doing, but I was totally dependent on her for my emotional support and stability through that breakup. And that happens a lot with parents and children and divorce situations. Okay. So let's talk about like closeness versus enmeshment, right? Um, Hallmarks of a healthy family relationships and dynamics include intimacy. They include, closeness and support and unconditional love that does not compromise the other person's emotional well-being, right? And again, it's hard for children to tell their parents about this. So your kid, you may think that your child's emotional well-being is good when in reality it is likely it's not, and they're just not saying anything to you about it because they perhaps have been conditioned over the years to make sure that, oh gosh, mom starts crying, I have to, change what I'm saying, I have to stop what I'm doing, what have you, to make sure that she's okay. Um, in close families, there there is a it's okay to lean on other people in tough times, but not on that dependency level, right? And there's no expectation that one person is going to fulfill all the roles and responsibilities for someone else's emotional state, right? And with healthy family relationships, there is also a lack of manipulation and guilt tripping. Okay. Um, as I said before, typically enmeshment, and codependency, they can have a lot in common, but they are not the same. Um, and typically the codependency comes as a result of the enmeshment. So just FYI on that. So what happens when we have enmeshment, and the bonds and are based on the obligatory guilt and loyalty, um, rather than freedom and mutual respect, right? A foundation of freedom and mutual respect. It can lead to a child feeling burdened by their parents' emotional needs, and that they're not able to pursue their own interest and establish independence and healthy boundaries and things like that. So sometimes we see that with younger children, and say, for instance, a son who wants to, um, I don't know, do acting instead of playing football. And the dad's like, "No, no, no, you have to do football. Football's good and healthy for you." And it's when in reality what's happening is dad is playing out his desire, what he wanted for his life, probably through his child, and his child's like, "I don't want to do this. I want to go act." And then they learn to stuff it, because if they share that, then dad gets mad or upset, mom starts to cry, and now we're caretaking for the parents and their emotions instead of figuring out what we want and going with what we want as the adult child. So, um there's a result of a stifling, again, feeling smothered, um way of being in the family, where if I step out of line here with this, it's perceived as by the parents as betrayal, and independence is seen as a threat, right? Again, tend to see this when kids go off to college, right? For 18 years, mom and dad have been in control of things, and then they go off to college and they're supposed to have all this independence, and parents get just crazy mad with that demonstration of independence, right? And then the parents start trying to control and clamp down even more, and that's when the guilt tripping comes in and all sorts of other things. So, um families that have um difficulty forming healthy relationships also outside of the family unit, because they prioritize family obligations and closeness over connections with others. Oh, you wanted to go, I know you're on spring break from college and you want to go with your best friend to, go skiing in Colorado. Well, every year our family takes this vacation and you need to be here for that. No, 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 they don't need to. Right? They're trying to find out, who am I outside of my parent or parents? Some of the problems that can result from enmeshment are, parentification. So when the child becomes res- steps in and takes on adult responsibilities, again, feeling responsible for the parent's well-being, um, they become people pleasers, perfectionists, and workaholics. Okay. I experienced parentification with my father growing up and some with my mom as I got older, and I became an absolute workaholic, absolute, and a perfectionist. If I didn't get it right, I was so hard on myself and others, and it was just awful, right? I would spend days and weeks and months fretting over how I didn't get something right. Also, another problem as a result of his enmeshment is the lack of individuality, right? Again, developing our own individual self outside of someone else. You see this a lot in couples, right? You can, with couples who appear to be quote unquote really, really close. Um, it it can be I don't know who I am outside of my spouse, right? And we see this with parents. I see this a lot with moms who have no idea who they are outside of being a mom. Okay. Enmeshment. Enmeshment. Um, there can be a fear of separation with enmeshed family members. Like they fear like they can't, that they don't have the ability to function on their own unless so and so's with them. And, they can't go to the doctor's office without so and so, or can't go shopping without so and so, can't go have the car, tires rotated without so and so. Like somebody always has to be with them. There's guilt. Adult children feel guilt and or anxiety about spending time away from their parents. Um, Reluctant to make their own decisions, fearing disappointing or making their parent angry. Um, Controlling behavior. Okay, I had that with my girls, where I tried to control their lives and make decisions. Some families it's controlling each other and they're making decisions for each other, and instead of sitting down and having a conversation around it. There's communication problems, difficulty communicating because again we don't want to upset, bother, or otherwise anger a parent or other person that we're in relationship with. um, Difficulty setting boundaries if we set boundaries at all, and problems in romantic relationships, right? So when enmeshed adult children prioritize their parent over their partners, um, it breeds resentment and neglect within their own relationships, and it's an unhealthy dependency on a parent when you become an adult and you're having your own relationships. So, what do we do to overcome enmeshment and begin living our own life? Well, first you have to set boundaries. Again, people, boundaries. Don't leave home without them, right? And even have them at home. So it is imperative. Both parents and adult children need to have boundaries, 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 boundaries. And for those estranged adult children who think you need boundaries, but your parents don't, that's not correct. Your parent is permitted to have their boundaries just as you are permitted to have yours. Okay. Um, and to, work through your feelings of guilt. If you're an adult child who is, feeling guilty because you're not there for your parent, or you've chosen to go somewhere else with friends instead of going on the family vacation, there's like that is your little red wagon to pull, right? Is to work on that for yourself. Um, helping to find ways to be autonomous and independent. I am in favor of trying to tell a parent, I'm not stepping away from this relationship because I don't love you. It's because I love you and I want to eventually have a relationship with you that I need to take some space right now, right? To figure out who I am outside of you, right? And if you're in a marriage and your spouse is trying to pull you in one way and your parent is trying to pull you in another way, it's very important to be able to let both, your spouse and your parent know, listen, I want healthy relationships with both of you. Mom, I need to be in relationship with my wife, and we need to develop our relationship. Mom, you and I have a relationship that's established, but now it's time for me to establish my own relationship with my wife. And it doesn't mean that I don't love you, Mom. I do, but I am not an 8-year-old anymore. I'm not a 16-year-old anymore. I need to find out who I am outside of you. And I need some space in order to do that. Right. And again, so that's communicating your needs. We have to learn how to communicate. Um, so if you grew up in a family that was enmeshed, it you probably did not have opportunities to find out who you are, right? Um, you felt a need to conform, probably, and be who your parents wanted you to be, right? Who they thought you were or are. So, and as a result of that, parents, when your children feel that way, they do not have a strong sense of who they are, of what matters to them, what they like, what they want, or what they need. So, this could be an adult child who then enters into a relationship, i.e., marriage, with someone and then becomes enmeshed with them to the exclusion of everyone else. Does that sound familiar? And because they never learned about this as a child, they weren't permitted to learn who they were outside of the family unit. So now they've gone on and gotten into a relationship with someone else and they still don't know who they are. And now they've just it's kind of been a transfer over to this new relationship. So whenever you're looking at this quote unquote gatekeeper that's in your child's life, it's important to think about that in relation to your child's responsibility and accountability in that relationship and the relationship with you, right? Again, there's a reason for every behavior. So be asking these questions, allow curiosity to come up. It's imperative. Absolutely 1,000% imperative. Okay. So I think I will leave it there for today. I encourage you, if you think that you may be in an enmeshed relationship with your parent and you're looking for support as an estranged adult child, to find a support group that can help nurture you finding who you are so that you can come back into a healthy relationship with your parent. And if you would like for to have your parent to work with me, I have several adult children who have referred their parent to me, because they are not able to get through to their parent, and I get that, right? It's difficult when we're in it and we've got all of this relational history with one another to be able to separate that out and kind of make sense of why coaching could help, and not make it sound like you need to go get help kind of thing, right? But if you think that I could potentially be helpful for your parent to learn about some of these things, feel free to send them my information, the website, my email address, what have you, the podcast, and ask them to listen to this episode specifically. And if you are a parent who thinks, well, maybe that's what was going on for my family with my kid, but I don't know what to do with that now, and you'd like support around that, please feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm happy to work with you as a coaching client and or within one of my support groups to find out how to step back and allow your child to have their own autonomy and be their own person. And perhaps maybe how you can do the same thing, okay, for yourself. So, on that note, I will leave it here. If you're interested in coaching one on one or the support groups, again, starting the week of September the 9th, feel free to reach out to me, theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Until next time.
This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.